"Careful, human, you have been in a coma for over 18 years, said the worried alien supervisor. The words floated through the darkness like distant echoes, and Katie Morrison tried to make sense of them, but her mind felt thick and slow, like moving through honey, and she could not quite grasp what they meant because 18 years was such a long time, and she remembered being 23 when the mission started, and now she would be 41. If what the voice said was true, her eyes refused to open at first, and the lids felt heavy, like someone had placed weights on them, and when she finally managed to crack them open just a sliver, the light burned, even though it was dim and soft and nothing like the harsh fluorescent light she remembered from the research station on Europa, and through the blur she could see a shape hovering over her, tall and slender with skin that shimmered like oil on water in shades of deep purple and silvers. Alien moved closer, and Katie could see that it had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its elongated face, and they were large and luminous, filled with something that looked almost like concern, and its mouth moved in a way that seemed wrong because it did not match the sounds she was hearing, and she realized with a start that the words were being translated somehow directly into her brain. "You must remain calm," the alien said, and its voice was gentle like wind chimes in a soft breeze, and Katie wanted to ask questions. But her throat was dry and her tongue felt like sandpaper against the roof of her mouth, and when she tried to speak, only a small croaking sound came out. Alien reached out with what she assumed was a hand, though it had 6 fingers instead of 5, and each one was longer than any human finger should be, and it touched a panel beside the bed she was lying on, and suddenly cool liquid was flowing into her mouth from a small tube that extended down from somewhere above her, and she drank gratefully, even though the taste was strange and slightly metallic. "My name is Zareth, and I have been your primary medical supervisor for the past 6 months, the alien explained, and Katie tried to process this information, but 6 months seemed impossible because she had no memory of any of it, and the last thing she remembered was the accident on the mining platform, when the support beam had collapsed and crushed half the crew, and she had been trying to reach the emergency beacon when everything went dark. "Where am I?" Katie managed to whisper, and her voice sounded wrong, even to her own ears, like it belonged to someone else entirely. "You are on Station Kepler 9 in orbit around the planet you called Neptune," the alien replied, "and we found your ship drifting in deep space 17 years ago. You were the only survivor, though barely alive, and we have been working to heal you ever since." Kati felt her chest tighten, and panic began to rise in her throat because 17 years was more than half her lifetime, and everyone she knew would think she was dead, and her parents would have mourned her and her younger sister. Amy would be 38 now instead of the 21-year-old college student she remembered. And the thought made her want to scream, but she did not have the strength. The alien seemed to sense her distress because it made a soft humming sound that somehow felt soothing, and it adjusted something on the panel, and warmth spread through Katie's body, easing the tension in her muscles, and she realized they must be pumping something into her bloodstream, something to keep her commure. Body was severely damaged, Zareth continued, and we had to place you in a medical coma while we worked to repair the injuries, and some of the damage was beyond even our technology to fix completely, and you will find that certain things are different now. "Different?" how Katie asked, and fear crept into her voice, because she was suddenly very aware that she could not feel her legs, and when she tried to move them, nothing happened, and the panic came rushing back stronger this time. Her eyes blinked in sequence, and it tilted its head in a gesture that might have been sympathy, and Katie felt her stomach drop even before the alien spoke. "Your lower spine was crushed beyond repair, and we had to replace much of it with synthetic material, and while you will regain some mobility, it will take time and extensive therapy, and there were other injuries as well, including damage to your lungs and heart and portions of your skeletal structure." Katie closed her eyes and tried not to cry, because crying seemed pointless after 18 years, and she was alive, which was more than she had any right to expect, but the thought of being broken and dependent made her want to give up right then and there. "You are stronger than you know," Zareth said, and Katie wondered if the alien could read her thoughts, or if her emotions were just that obvious, and we have seen humans overcome far worse, And besides, you have something that will help you through this, what? Katie asked without opening her eyes. Hope, Zareth replied simply, and the word hung in the air between them over the following days. Katie learned to navigate her new reality, and it was harder than anything she had ever done before, and the therapy was exhausting both physically and mentally because her muscles had atrophied during the long coma, and she had to relearn basic movements that she had once taken for granted. The station was enormous and filled with species from across the galaxy, and Katie saw beings that looked like walking plants and others that seemed to be made of living crystal, and there were creatures with too many limbs and not enough eyes, and some with no limbs at all, and they all moved through the corridors with purpose while she struggled to move her finger. Zareth was patient, though, and never made her feel inadequate, and the aliens showed her recordings of Earth that had been transmitted over the years, and Katie watched in amazement as her home planet changed and grew. And she saw that humanity had not given up after the disaster that took her crew, and instead they had pushed further into space. And now there were colonies on Mars and Europa, and even in the asteroid Belchor. People are remarkable, Zareth told her one day as they worked on getting Katie's legs to support her weight, and they have a resilience that few species possess, and when others would have retreated after such loss, they chose to continue forward. Katie felt a surge of pride at that, and she pushed herself harder than before, and slowly her body began to respond, and after 3 months she could stand with assistance, and after 6, she took her first shaky steps using a walker that had been specially designed for her, and Zareth made that chiming sound that she had learned meant happiness. There were setbacks too, and days when Katie wanted to give up because the pain was too much or the progress too slow, and she would lie in her bed and stare at the curved ceiling of her room and wonder what the point was when everything she had known was gone and her life had moved on without her. But Zareth would not let her wallow, and the alien would arrive each morning with news from Earth or stories about other patients who had overcome similar challenges, and slowly, Katie began to see that maybe her life was not over, but simply different than she had planned. She met other humans on the station, and they were from the newer colonies, and they treated her like a legend because she was from the first wave of explorers and one of the few survivors from that era, and they asked her questions about what it was like back then, and Katie found herself telling stories she had not thought about in what felt like forever. There was a young woman named Lisa who was studying alien medicine, and she would visit Katie's room in the evenings, and they would talk about the differences between human and alien physiology, and Lisa told her about the advances that had been made in medical technology, how humans were living longer and healthier lives now, and Katie felt both amazed and left behind. Another visitor was an older man named George, who worked in the station's agricultural sector, and he had been in space for 40 years, and he told Katie that adaptation was the key to survival and that she would find her place eventually. And she wanted to believe him, but doubt still gnawed at her. Zareth began teaching Katie about the galactic community, and she learned that humanity was still considered a young species, but one that showed great promise, and the alien explained that there were thousands of civilized worlds and countless forms of life, and that war was rare because most species had learned that cooperation benefited everyone. Katie found this hard to believe at first because human history was filled with conflict. But Zareth showed her examples of peaceful coexistence and explained that species that could not overcome their violent tendencies rarely survived long enough to reach the stars, and those that did usually learned quickly that resources were more abundant through trade than conquest. As the months passed, Katie grew stronger, and her legs could support her for longer periods, though she still tired easily, and she began exploring the station on her own, using a cane that Zareth had given her. And she discovered gardens where plants from dozens of worlds grew together, and observation decks where she could watch the swirling storms of Neptune below. She also discovered that she had a talent for languages, and the translator implant that the aliens had given her helped. But she found that she could pick up the nuances of different species, communication styles, quickly, and Zareth suggested she might consider becoming a liaison between humans and other species. The idea appealed to Katie because it gave her a purpose, and she threw herself into studying EHA. Vol used to express complex emotions, and she practiced until her THA